The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon if you're on the East Coast. Good morning if you're on the West Coast. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Martha Campbell and I'm with Rocky Mountain Institute. And we are excited to be speaking to you today about an effort that we have underway called Realize. And the specific focus of today's webinar is speaking to you about industrial approaches to doing net zero energy retrofits. Realize is a collaborative initiative that was spearheaded by Rocky Mountain Institute and is currently funded through a United States Department of Energy award. We have many partners on board with this effort, and the list continues to grow. This project specifically that we'll talk to you about today includes partners from Passive House Institute US, Net Zero Energy Coalition, Revision Architecture, the Levy Partnership, Staengl Engineering, Energiesprong, and New York State Energy Research and Development Authority. We also have industry partners that include RenewAire, Goodman Manufacturing, Mitsubishi, and PowerWise. So, what we'll be going over today are an introduction to what Realize is, what the next steps are for this initiative, and we'll also have guests from the NYSERDA Retrofit New York program joining us, Jonathan Benezri, and they will be speaking about their concurrent program that is attempting a similar feat. And then we'll talk to you about a request for proposals that we will be issuing today. And that will be outlined to you all by Jordan from the Levy Partnership. And then we'll talk a little bit about a webinar that NYSERDA will be hosting that will hopefully give you more guidance and ideas on the concept that we're hoping that you can support us with. And then lastly, we'll close with questions that you may have that we will attempt to answer. And for those questions that we can't immediately respond to, we will get back to you on. So we wanted to frame this, kind of just what the issue is with retrofits. And, we're specifically focused on multifamily housing, but I think this picture does a really good job of representing kind of the brain damage that most people go through when they're doing a renovation, right? You kind of don't know what you're going to get into in a building. There's, rubble everywhere, and it's most project timelines are never met, and the thing takes twice as long as you expected, and it costs twice as much as you expected. And this is what people are just accustomed to doing when they take on a renovation of their home. They're still willing to go through this kind of headache. So why is it so hard to get energy improvement measures included in something that people are obviously already undergoing and willing to suffer through? And we think if we want this to take off, that it really needs to be a lot easier. So can you imagine if you had to go to a Verizon store and select the hardware that went into your cell phone, the towers that you were going to route your service through, the frequency of the signal that you were going to have your service come through, would you have a cell phone today? What would the level of adoption have been for cell phones if that was what we asked people to do when they went to go and get a cell phone? You probably wouldn't have the same market penetration that we see today of this ubiquitous technology. And so we need to basically incorporate energy improvement measures into how people renovate their homes and offer it in a very similar service offering as you see with a Verizon service plan when you try to go get a cell phone. So there are some folks already thinking this way on the other side of the pond, and they are based in the Netherlands, and it's an organization known as Energiesprong. And we're going to show you a little video. Some of you might have already seen this already, but it will give you a sense of how they have integrated this technology to be able to offer a much more integrated net zero energy retrofit package try and do the sound on this. So we'll have it be silent. Can folks see that? Is it coming through? It's very strange. It's a little awkward. I think there's just a delay in the broadcast of this, but hopefully you're getting a sense of this, even though it's a little jerky. Okay. I think, there we go. All right, that's the finished product. Yeah, you can, okay. We'll go back to our presentation, but that gives you a sense of kind of the much more pre-integrated, pre-designed solutions that are being offered in the Netherlands. That specific retrofit was done in a day. Sorry, we're having a couple of technical difficulties. Let me just pull up the right slide. You know, the idea is that we would like to work with you all to start to develop something similar. In the Netherlands, they've done over 2,000 of these types of retrofits on multifamily housing of varying heights and styles, and they have over 100,000 units of soft demand committed for very similar style of retrofit. So what they've done is they have basically created a kind of a full offering and really thought through the entire business model of what this needs to look like in order to get this to scale in the market. So they offer net zero energy homes with a long-term performance warranty. The idea is that the retrofit is supposed to be non-intrusive with minimal tenant disruption. As I mentioned, that project that we saw was concluded in a day on average. I think a lot of their projects take around 10 to 14 days. And then the idea is that it is financeable through the energy savings. And so it needs to be financeable without a lot of additional upfront capital for the building owner. And then lastly, as you saw in the video, you can tell something has happened to the building, and there is, there's a stylistic component to it that increases demand and interest in this because it's attractive. So what the folks in the Netherlands have done is they have basically created an organization, like I mentioned, called Energiesprong, and that organization is organizing the market. And they're doing a couple of things. They're aggregating large volumes of demand across large portfolio holders. So they've worked, I think, with like the top 4 to 6 public housing agencies in the Netherlands and aggregated an initial contract of 6,000 units of demand for this product. And then they presented that demand to the supply side, folks like you all, and said, here's what the market wants. What can you create? What can you put together in order to offer a product that meets this vision? Simultaneously, there were other barriers that needed to be addressed in the market. There were code restrictions in terms of how far out those panel systems could come off the building that needed to be addressed. And so they had to work with the local governments to basically create more accommodating codes and regulations for this kind of a solution. Simultaneously, the financing of these kinds of buildings needed to be addressed. The financing cycle, is very different, obviously, from some of our financing cycles in the U.S., but there were aspects of it that needed to be streamlined, and the market needed to be comfortable financing this kind of innovation and technology. So they are working across also been working in New York to help them develop their Retrofit New York program. So this model is scaling, and with the big piece of it is organizing the market in this fashion. The state of need. So what is REALIZE? REALIZE is RMI's initiative to basically adapt this model inspired by the Energiesprong approach and bring it to the U.S. market. And to create a very large tent of collaborators and market actors that are required in order to see this kind of fundamental step change in how we approach renovation construction in the U.S. So just to give you a sense of the market opportunity, we have been doing a building typology study for this specific Department of Energy award that I mentioned, and kind of looking at just in the multifamily market alone, what size of market potential is there? And based on this analysis, we found in the cold and mixed humidity climates where we expect kind of that more panel-heavy system to be required, there's roughly 8 billion square feet of market potential for this kind of solution. And then if you look across the broader United States, it's up to 16 billion square feet. And as I mentioned, a big part of our role in the market and folks like Retrofit New York is aggregating large volumes of demand similar to what was done in the Netherlands in order to present that to suppliers and to create a much more consistent and guaranteed pipeline of demand. So I won't bog you down too much with this, but I wanted to give you a sense of our thinking around the economics on this, which obviously is a huge piece of the puzzle. And one of the things that we have to do, obviously, is make the business case to building owners. And we have started with the affordable housing market segment for a variety of reasons. One of them is obviously strong mission alignment, but then there's also these large portfolio holders that we think we can work with to aggregate demand as well as streamline some of the financing. And what we are trying to help them do is obviously create a way to, to improve their buildings that's lower risk, it's turnkey, it helps unlock up more capital and resources, and it's done in coordination with state and city government, like I mentioned previously, whether that's around code or it's around better integrating to local sustainability goals and objectives and resources that are available all the way to utility incentives, and then creating healthier assets, and then that informs the market this is a legitimate and desirable solution and approach for improving their building stock, and the cycle continues and continues to strengthen the market signals to support it. So we did a typology study and a feasibility study for the city of San Francisco about a year ago, and kind of subdivided their multifamily building stock into kind of three main groups. So one was 6-unit, the other was a 15-unit prototype, and then a 65-unit prototype. I'm going to walk you through kind of some of our thinking around the economics for one of these cases, and kind of what the cost today is of a retrofit, how much do costs need to be compressed, and what does it mean basically on a building owner's operating income for them to be able to basically finance these kinds of projects. So in a nutshell, without going through each little line on here, the idea is that you have a business as usual scenario of cash flows on the left that a building owner is used to seeing on their income statement. And when you basically go through a program like what we're recommending for Realize, you are going to have the ability to capture more rent, as well as reduce your operating expenses, with obviously an increase. That little orange line is an energy services agreement. As I mentioned, the model in the Netherlands is inclusive of a performance guarantee, so that you're actually capturing those savings, that they're not just theoretical savings. So there's a little bit of cost associated with that, but that also includes the maintenance of some of these systems. But on the net, you are seeing an increase in your operating income, and if you look at that over a 25-year or a 15-year period, we specifically will focus on the 15-year period in this situation. You have an increased debt capacity of roughly $715,000 over a 15-year period, which lines up with that low-income housing tax credit cycle. And so in theory, if you're doing these improvements to the building that are generating some kind of cash flow, that is what your project should cost you, right, if you wanted to finance it with those cash flows. So the next step in the analysis was basically looking at how much does a retrofit cost today, and we focused on minimizing carbon in this analysis. So we did kind of two different scenarios where you had on-site renewables and off-site renewables. And basically you can see that big green line that has an arrow at the end of it is that $715,000. And so the cost of the project basically needs to be below that line. This is for the 65-unit scenario, which is a little bit higher of a building. It was a little bit harder to get it to net zero carbon with the on-site solar, and it was therefore it required a lot more to be done to the envelope than some of the other scenarios that were described, the 6-unit and the 15-unit in San Francisco. But with incentives, which is kind of the second bar for each of these different scenarios, you can see that it's almost in the money for this 65-unit building. So when we did this analysis across those three different building typologies, we got a sense of how much do we need to compress costs for this to be affordable today. And as you can see, with incentives for the 6-unit and the 15-unit prototype, the cost with incentives is the gray bar, that this is already totally affordable in California, specifically in San Francisco. If we wanted to get this where we didn't have to rely on incentives, you know, as maybe programs start to phase out their incentive programs, or for whatever reason, you would need to see costs compressed by 5% if you wanted to have a 25-year discounted payback period, and for the 6-unit building, and 40% if you wanted to see a payback in over a 15-year discounted payback period. So you can see that for the 15-unit scenario and then the 65-unit scenario. This gives us a sense of the target cost of the entire package per unit that we need to be hitting in that market. So this is what we're thinking through as we enter different markets for this concept. Lastly, I'll just show you kind of some of the cost compression that they're starting to see in the Netherlands. So this was for a Dutch garden style retrofit. And you can see for each, I know this is a little bit small, but for each of these different components to their package, you know, they're seeing major cost improvements or cost reductions by continuing to aggregate that demand and doing more and more of the kind of pilots that we'll talk more about today. And even just over, I guess, you know, like a 7-year period now, on average, their packages have seen a 50% to 60% reduction in cost. You can see here that the facades, obviously, the side facades and the facades that include glazing, you're getting between a 40 to 55% cost reduction is what their goal is by 2019. And then a big piece of it too is this energy module, which is kind of this pre-integrated set of mechanical systems, and also that's inclusive of an inverter and the PVs, where they're also trying to drive down significant costs, as you can see, 73% reduction. So I'll quickly talk about next steps on our effort, and then I'm going to hand it over to Jonathan to talk about what NYSERD is doing, which is really exciting. But we're basically in the midst of recruiting a pilot building, having multiple conversations with building owners and cities and states and different housing agencies, and we'll be issuing an RFP at the end of this month to select that building. And simultaneously, we're continuing to do market research about the approaches that are being used in the Netherlands to make sure that we're transferring that knowledge to this market and helping to kind of build on the shoulders of our colleagues in Europe to help our market and you all. And then today we'll be talking about an RFP that we're issuing for a facade, a panel fabricator for this specific pilot that we will be doing with the DOE award. And Jordan will be talking with you a little bit more about that and what we hope to learn from you all through that process. To give you a sense of the timeline, we hope to have our, I'm looking at, we've got fire sirens going as well. We will have our pilot RFP issued, like I said, by the end of July. We hope to have a building selected by the end of this year. Earlier would be ideal. Then we'll start kind of working through the design phase, where we will continue to talk to those to the building owner to hopefully get them to fully commit to actually implementing those designs. The idea is that formal commitment will happen no later than the middle of 2019, and construction would commence at the beginning of 2020 at the latest, with kind of those final designs and construction specs being created in the latter half of 2019. And then once the building is retrofit, there will be a year of monitoring the building to see how it performs. So that is it for me for now, and I will hand it over to Jonathan.
Hi, good afternoon or good morning. As Martha pointed out, we've got a bi-coastal audience. My name is Jonathan Ben Ezri, and I am a senior project manager at NYSERD, the New York State Energy Research and Development Authority. I'm also the industry lead on the Retrofit New York initiatives. And so what is Retrofit New York? That's mainly what I'll be telling you, and also I'll be going into the design phase that we've just kicked off with the projects that we are now launching. So Retrofit New York is really an effort to create a market, plain and simple. It's a market that doesn't really exist yet in the US. It does in Europe and the Netherlands and starting in other countries. We're really trying to accelerate the onset of that market, and we want it to be a market that is self-sustaining. So basically not one that's built up around incentives, but one that is, self-sustaining, has interest on both the supply side and the demand side, and incorporates the lessons that we've learned, or that we're learning from our European counterparts. So there's going to be some redundancy with what Martha explained about Energiesprong and with what I'll tell you, but it's primarily because we, NYSERDA, and specifically the Retrofit New York team, have modeled our efforts after those of Energiesprong. So in the same way that the Energiesprong officials aggregated demands across a number of housing agencies and then brought that to the industry, NYSERDA and the Retrofit New York team went to the multiple housing owners portfolio owners of multifamily housing and said to them, we're working on identifying players in the design and construction community and the manufacturing community, of course, who are capable of performing high performance retrofits and specifically net zero energy retrofits. And if we can get solutions, if we can get these actors to provide solutions, would you be interested in procuring them? And we heard we got a lot of interest from those owners. Conversely, when we were speaking with the industry, we asked them if they would be interested in providing these solutions if housing owners demanded them. And again, we got very good interest. And that sort of initial marketing, if you will, led to the release of our RFP earlier this year. And since we've released that RFP, we've actually gotten a number of teams providing these designs and a number of buildings on which these designs are being executed selected. And we're now in the process of working on those designs. So in addition to the supply and the demand side, it's also very critical to engage both the regulatory agencies, which in New York mainly are HPD, the Housing Preservation and Development Agency, and HCR, the New York State Housing and Community Renewal Agency. These folks have a lot of say into project approvals and the kinds of restrictions, the technical restrictions that need to be looked at and potentially need to evolve in order to have these retrofits happen at scale. In addition to the regulatory agencies, it's very important to engage the financial lenders and banks and that community. And so Retrofit New York has been engaging all of these sectors in order to make sure that all the critical stakeholders needed to enable a market to develop at scale are providing their buy-in. NYSERDA's role is really that of a catalyst and of a convener. Very similar to Energiesprong and RMI, and basically, it's about getting the right actors in the right place, speaking with each other at the same table. So we're not prescribing the requirements for the solutions, at least not at a very detailed level. We're really looking to the industry to provide that sort of guidance and come up with the solutions as they best see fit. We're merely providing high-level criteria to ensure that the needs of all the various stakeholders are met, and basically, providing a forum and an environment in which all these actors can work together successfully. we see a huge opportunity for everyone involved, really, but specifically for the supply side. So the designers, the builders, and of course the manufacturers. There are 1.7 million units of affordable housing in New York State, which this initiative is targeting. And as a result of back of the envelope calculations that we've done, if only half of those 1.7 million units were retrofitted over the next 20 years, it adds up to over $1 billion market per year. So we really see a huge opportunity for manufacturers like you to get involved. Another thing to point out is that this instance of our initiative, this RFP that we've released and the resulting projects, are really the first in a series. So the design phase that we're launching now is scheduled to last to the end of the year, but we are committed to continuing to launch additional RFPs, basically until this support and involvement from NYSERDA is no longer needed. So, whether that's another RFP or another 2 or 3 RFPs, we're committed to it. We want to see this market come to light. Additionally, in parallel with the 6 projects that I'm going to be telling you a little more about that we're launching now, we're working with NYCHA, the New York City Housing Authority, which is the largest public housing authority in the nation, to launch an additional project. And as well, we're working with SUNY, the State University of New York system, to identify, actually we've already identified a building, but now we're working on the details of how to launch a project with them as well. And so these are 2 examples of additional scale that we are trying to achieve. So what's in it for you guys? Well, like I said, there's a big potential market that we've done our best to quantify. We see an opportunity for basically first movers, because the folks that get involved first and test the waters, learn how their products need to be adapted in order to fit into this market and these projects, will basically understand what is required for scale. And obviously, the more products that can be included in these projects, the more successful you can be in having a share of that market. We are looking for new ideas, innovative ideas, ways to integrate products in ways that haven't necessarily been done before. And also, we are looking eventually for a performance guarantee, just as the folks in the Netherlands have been able to achieve. On our first projects, we're not requiring that as a hard set requirement, but we are asking that our teams provide us with a pathway, meaning that they tell us the steps that are needed to get to that performance guarantee. And it's not just something that we're looking for to provide us assurance, but it's something that will provide assurance to the other critical stakeholders, meaning the project owners, the regulatory agencies, and the lenders. The more certainty that a lender has over the level of performance in a pilot project, the more willing we think they will be to lend to that project. And the more capital we can get funneled into those projects, the stronger we see them ending up. So what are the building blocks of these solutions? It's mainly envelope measures, mechanical systems like heating and cooling and ventilation, and obviously also on-site generation. These are the basic building blocks. We're not prescribing exactly how each of those will be achieved, but additionally, we are looking for these solutions to be installable in short order to minimize on-site construction time and disruption to the residents. And we're looking for basically a paradigm shift from very bespoke, custom projects that require a lot of detailed design and on-site labor to a very much more industrialized process where a lot of the labor is done in the factory and a lot of the components are manufactured off-site, as we've seen with other industries in this country, like the auto industry. That is a huge component in getting costs to be compressed and driving scale. What you see here is a photo of a traditional EFIS installation. You can see there are a number of laborers on site, and while this methodology is the norm and has been widely used, it is not going to work at scale. It is not going to be feasible to have on-site labor or detailed on-site labor to ensure that all the quality and performance components of these projects are met. In order to tightly air seal the buildings and make sure that they meet the standards of high performance retrofits, we're going to have to see projects that involve more products manufactured off-site, like in the Netherlands, probably factories that are created in order to enable this off-site manufacturing. What you see here is a picture of a factory from the Netherlands that is producing panels with built-in windows. And here you see a picture of a project that is using those same off-site manufactured panels. So let's talk about the design phase. So we've just kicked off our design phase about a month ago, and we're providing a lot of support to the teams that we've selected. We're providing them with a stipend each to help offset the cost of the design, a professional coach to get the teams integrated, and each coach also is an expert in manufacturing, and so there's a bit of technical assistance as well that they're providing. We're providing an IPNA, which is an integrated physical needs assessment for each of the buildings that we've awarded the projects, and that's to get the teams up and running. And so really, it's all of these points of support that I'm mentioning are to emphasize that NYSERDA is committed to getting these projects built. We're also looking for open communication between the teams, make sure that the solutions are able to capitalize on the collective knowledge of all those teams that are involved. So let me go through some of the goals that we're looking to achieve. These are very analogous to what Martha already mentioned. We're looking for standardized, scalable solutions so that they can be replicated and reach scale. They need to be cost-effective. They need to improve resident quality of life, another very critical component of wide-scale adoption. I mentioned the performance guarantee. Building resiliency is another nice to have. It's not a hard requirement, but we're hoping that teams also think about that and integrate some resiliency components into their designs. Another factor is that we are requiring that fossil fuels be excluded. So these solutions will more or less be all electric or have components like, say, solar thermal that don't require any kind of fuel. We have 3 milestones in our design phase. So we've already hit our #1 milestone, which was actually launching the designs and providing support to the teams. We have a set of deliverables that are due at the end of the 3rd month that will help to get the buy-in from those stakeholders that I mentioned, the lenders and the regulators and project owners. And that is, again, to make sure that when we get to the end of these designs, we shorten the period between the conclusion of the design phase and the beginning of construction. It's our goal to get these built and so that we can learn from those actual on-site projects. So we have a number of measures that will entail a transfer of knowledge from Energiesprong. We are putting on webinars that are tailored to meet the requests of the teams we've selected. We also are providing materials like case studies, reports, and videos specific to various components of these projects. How to collaborate, how to get projects off the ground with housing agencies, more technically oriented videos and reports. And we also have a model solution that the Energiesprong team developed for this program. And we're putting on a webinar next week that is focusing on that model solution. And it's not simply, you know, here's what we would do on a building, you know, go and replicate it. It's really, here's our thinking, here's how we went about our design, and here are some ideas that you could take with you to potentially improve your design process. So that webinar is next week, Tuesday, from 10 to 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And if you want more details on that, we'll be providing that to you as well. So lastly, just to look at the timeline, the design phase should be concluding at the end of this year, and we're hoping to start construction on our projects at the beginning of next year. Thank you, and if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer those at the end of the presentation.
Hi, this is Jordan Dentz with the Levy Partnership. I'm going to talk to you about the request for proposals that will be issued at the end of the day today. As Martha mentioned earlier in the webinar, we will be issuing a request for proposals to manufacturers who will be awarded the work to do the pilot building that Realize is going to include in their project. The manufacturer we envision will be involved in providing a shell and enclosure system that will be inclusive of walls, roof, possibly foundation system, windows, etc., cladding as well. And we're seeking a partner to collaborate on the design, engineering, and manufacturing. We don't expect that a system will be off the shelf currently. We expect that there will be a collaboration with a manufacturer or a group of manufacturers that will come together to provide this and develop this solution. It's an opportunity to be at the forefront of this type of work, demonstrate a successful application of the solution. So included in the RFP will be a generic description of a pilot building. This is not the pilot building that will be constructed. It is expected to be similar to this and have many of these characteristics, but the purpose of this pilot building description, the RFP, is so we can compare proposals and submissions apples to apples to each other. The pilot building is going to be 5 stories with about 50 units, a brick exterior, flat roof, some other details you see here on the screen. It'll be have sufficient clearance to add thickness of walls and height in the roof, to add enclosure system. Basically, a simple mid-rise building without ornate architectural features. We'll have a basement and a structure suitable for photovoltaic panels. The RFP will also be accompanied by a SketchUp model that will have more details about the building. During the Q&A period and afterwards, we would be very interested in learning what additional information you need from us to provide a complete response to the RFP. So please feel free to suggest things after the end of this session. I'm going to go over some of the functional needs that are part of the RFP. We've divided those into 2 categories, requirements in the first category, and then some project goals and preferred targets in the second category. And these include things like the subsystem R values for walls, roofs, and the foundation that you can see on the screen here. Thermal bridging, we would like to be minimized. Air tightness, we have requirements around for opaque-only systems, as well as systems with pre-installed fenestration. Moisture management, the systems should be compatible with the Energy Star Certified Homes program, vapor control suitable to the climate, and the condensation resistance meeting FEIS, that's Hazard House Institute US guidance. Architectural requirements include, obviously we need to meet building codes that are applicable to the site, assuming a building over 40 feet high, types 1 to 4 construction. The specific location of the pilot, yet to be determined, may impose additional requirements down the road. Attachment, it must attach to the existing exterior wall. We do not wish to remove existing cladding, the brick cladding, as you saw in the Energiesprong photos and videos. They went right over the exterior existing cladding. The attachment should minimize thermal bridging, however. Panels should be relatively lightweight. We have some limits here for 10 PSF for walls and 5 pounds per square foot for roofs. Ideally, they shouldn't be too thick. And in terms of cladding, we would prefer a panel that has cladding integrated, but if it does not, then those cladding components should also be pre-assembled to facilitate rapid application on the field. A few other requirements, we will be looking at embodied energy. While this is not an absolute requirement, low embodied energy and carbon footprint will be preferred. We will be looking to you to help prepare calculations to that effect. Mechanical and electrical and plumbing systems will be added to these, to the retrofit, and we anticipate that the roof and/or wall panels may need to accommodate those systems. They may be integrated into them or provide chases or other ability to integrate with the wall cladding and roof cladding systems. Project panels should be designed for same-day delivery and installation. So the RFP will request a number of information from each proposer, company background, company qualifications, specifications, and response to those functional needs, which are more detailed in the proposal in the RFP. We'll be asking for cost estimates, your vision of the design, production, installation, schedule, and process. And again, we're not expecting proposers to have done this before. So we'd be looking for your qualifications in the respect that, are you able to ramp up to do this kind of a project, your interest, your capabilities that can be applied to conducting this kind of a retrofit or producing these kind of systems. Finally, I'll go over the timeline. The RFP will be released by the end of the day today, and you will each get an email with a link to where that is located, as well as a recording of this webinar. There will be a Q&A period that will go through the end of the month of July. Any clarifications to the RFP that are applicable to everybody will be disseminated to everyone who is interested. We ask that you, by the end of the month, indicate your intent to submit an application in response to the RFP. That way we'll know to keep you abreast of any updates. We are looking for proposals to be submitted by August 24th, after which we will have a period of interviews where we'll speak with the proposees in early September, and then we anticipate a selection by the end of September of this year. I'm going to turn it back over to Martha.
Okay. Thank you. So I just wanted to reiterate what Jonathan invited you all to attend, which was next week's Energiesprong Field Study and New York Model Solution webinar. Again, that starts at 10 a.m. Eastern on July 17th and is a 3-hour webinar. So we recognize that's a decent chunk of time, but we think you'll find a lot of the details and specifics on this topic to be very relevant to your proposals and your work. So we invite you to join. So that concludes today's presentation. Thank you all so much for joining us. And now I'd like to open it up for questions. And oh, I see a couple here asking if this webinar has been recorded. It has been recorded, and we, as Jordan mentioned, will we'll post that on our website and email that out as soon as it's available. Let's see here. I think in order to ask questions, you need to type them in. So I'll be looking at, or I can try and unmute everyone. Let's see. I think you can raise your hand if you have a question and I can unmute you. Okay, for the WebEx event next week, we will be emailing the registration link out to you along with, like I said, the recording of this webinar and the RFP. So we'll make sure that gets to you via email. If you have attended this webinar, at a minimum, you will definitely be on the list to receive the request for proposals. So we'll make sure that those get out to everyone who, at a minimum, was on this webinar, as well as a larger distribution list. And please feel free, and if you know of others that you think would be interested in being involved, please feel free to forward that along. Do we strictly want to work with U.S. corporations?
Sort of.
I mean, I think it's a question that is coming up.
For the Retrofit New York initiative, around that topic, it's really just important that the involved firms are able to work in
the U.S.
Yeah. Basically, the project has to be buildable, by the firms involved. So could the design, potentially have international contributions? Sure. Can the labor be international? Probably not. But if, we don't have a hard requirement around the firms being American. No.
Same with the DOE. It's obviously preferred that things be produced in the U.S. So, and just realistically, from a cost standpoint, it's probably going to be more cost effective to purchase goods that are produced here as opposed to shipping them over from another market. But if it's a foreign manufacturer that wants to set up operations in the U.S., I don't see why that's not feasible. The RFP, yes, will include a request for a cost target. We don't have a cost target, do we? Do we have a cost target?
In the RFP?
I don't think we do. We do not have a cost target in there, but we are asking for your expected costs.
Just more on the point that the question that I just answered. What we would like to see ideally, in parallel with this, market for demand for retrofits, is basically workforce development. So, facilities that crop up in order to meet that demand, and thus the creation of new jobs within, within New York State or nearby, obviously. But as this type of project, as this type of deep energy retrofit becomes more affordable and more in demand, we fully expect it to exceed, to go beyond the boundaries of New York State and even beyond affordable housing. So, so as far as local manufacturing, it would be nice to see that, and we're hoping to drive that kind of development along with the demand for these retrofits.
And a question came up that are the NYSERDA teams already with their supply group? And I would say maybe a few of them have some suppliers involved, but it's open, right?
Yeah, so the designs are very early stage right now. They're really just, you know, like I said, these were launched about a month ago and still have 5 months to go. There's definitely an opportunity for manufacturers to get involved. I encourage that, and yeah, I would say for any of those that are, we can have a follow-up conversation about exactly how to do that.
Yeah, and just to be clear, the RFP that we just walked you through is specifically for a Department of Energy pilot, and we haven't selected the actual site for that. It is likely going to be in the Northeast or the Midwest. So just to be clear that this isn't an RFP for the NYSERDA project. That would be a separate process. Let's see, we answered that one. So this, I think, is just the, you know, can products come from other markets question. If it's a existing finished product, I mean, I think that's fair game.
Yeah, I'm not sure I understood the question.
So, or if it's, I think I'm understanding this question, like if there's a finished product that already exists in another market, could that be considered? And I think it's fair game if it would like to be considered. If it's a component that goes into a panel system, I think that's a conversation that we could help facilitate with a US-based manufacturer.
Yeah, there's no restriction against any type of product, component, or anything. All that NYSERDA is requiring is that the high level requirements in our RFP are met. So finished product,
okay.
Yeah, products that are currently on the market, as long as they can, you know, make sense for the project, there's no issue with that.
Another question is, are there any limitations or restrictions on property IP? We do not have restrictions on property or proprietary IP in our DOE project, and I'm assuming.
Well, so we are requiring that the designs, once they're complete, are shared in an open source fashion. So basically with the public. It doesn't mean that, you know, proprietary details we're not requiring that your IP becomes public. It's just that the designs will be.
And the same will hold true for our project, but we're not requiring the disclosure of any proprietary IP. So the next question is, how do suppliers find out the teams for NYSERDA projects already running? Is this on the website?
So the teams were publicly announced a week or so ago, and there's a press release on the NYSERDA website that identifies those teams. So I would just navigate to our website and look for recent press releases, and you'll find it there. Or you can just Google Retrofit New York and press release, and you'll find it.
I think those are all the questions. Feel free to type something again if I missed a question, and obviously feel free to send us more. And yes, to be clear, the RFP being released today is for the RMI project. The RFP is not on our website yet. We are still working on loading it. So that will be available either later this evening or tomorrow. And we will, again, email that out as well.
And no, the RMI project does not need to be in New York State.
That is correct. It will not be in New York because NYSERDA's got that covered.
question about HVAC systems right above?
That was the
Okay.
from another market, from a Canadian market.
Okay.
Any other questions? Do the RFP designs need to size HVAC?
No, we're not. The RFPs will not include HVAC component to them, only that the panels should include some provision for inclusion of HVAC components in them potentially. We're not providing the location of the site, so there's no way you could size equipment anyway.
If there are folks on the line who have integrated HVAC systems, though, that they would like to be considered for the project, we very much welcome a conversation on that topic. And even though, as Jordan mentioned, the idea is that these will be the panel systems and that ideally they will be considering how potential HVAC integrates into that system. I don't know if people kind of noticed, and I'm sorry I didn't narrate the Energiesprong video, but there is an actual chassis that has all of these different mechanical components kind of integrated into a box that attaches to the exterior of the building. And so in this design presentation that Energiesprong will also be doing next week on behalf of NYSERDA, you'll see how they're thinking about making these systems kind of able to be installed to the exterior of the building. And some of them are, actually, I'm not sure about with this Bronx example, if it's like individual units receiving individual systems, but that is also an option that we are seeing implemented in Europe.
IPNA something was the word?
Yes, what does an integrated project needs assessment entail, or physical needs? Okay.
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
Hi, this is Jordan. So the integrated physical needs assessment is basically a physical needs assessment for the building that includes an energy audit.
Yeah, it's meant to encompass energy and water deficiencies along with health and safety needs. So it's really like a full-scale, comprehensive needs audit.
It includes a solar assessment as well.
So yes, just to confirm, the RFP does not need to include mechanical systems at this time. I think that concludes the questions. Any final comments from the group here, or? Good.
Well, I would just say, you know, from my end anyway, thank you all for your interest. You know, it's not really about us. It's really about you and you know, those who are kind of willing to come on this journey with us and lead the market. So we're hoping to see continued interest and continued involvement going forward.
Yes, I would like to echo Jonathan's appreciation. We are thrilled that you all joined us today. We know this was definitely on a compressed timeline, and we just wanted to make sure that that you were also able to attend next week's design presentation. So thank you so much for joining us, and we will be sending out those emails and the recording here shortly. And please don't hesitate to contact us with with any questions, you can contact us at realize@rmi.org, and we will be happy to help. Okay, I think that concludes the presentation. Thank you and have a great day.